Okay, so we're diving into something a lot of people struggle with, I think, and that is this whole self-doubt thing.
Yeah,
Um, and we're looking specifically at this excerpt, overcoming self-doubt, building confidence one step at a time.
right.
And it's interesting because, we all want to be confident, obviously,
Of course.
but the excerpt makes this point that maybe getting rid of self-doubt completely, like maybe that's not the goal.
Exactly.
So how do we kind of find that sweet spot, where self-doubt is actually helpful?
I think the text kind of uses the analogy of a smoke detector, right? It's
Right.
like, most of the time it's just going off because you burnt the toast.
Yeah, yeah.
But every now and then, it actually is alerting you to a real fire.
Hmm.
And so, we don't want to just completely disable the smoke detector because it could be useful,
Yeah.
but we also don't want to be so afraid of it going off all the time that we never, cook anything.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's more about like figuring out, okay, is this a real fire or am I just, overreacting a little bit?
Exactly. Yeah. It's about discerning between that helpful heads up and just like, oh, this is a full-blown anxiety spiral that's not productive.
Right, right. And the excerpt also talks about some of these like triggers for self-doubt, right? Like
Mm.
uncertainty, stepping outside your comfort
Oh,
zone,
sure.
fear of failure,
Yes.
comparing yourself to other people. I mean, that's a big one, I think,
Huge. Yeah.
especially with social media and everything these days.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think what's interesting about all those triggers is that they all share this common thread of challenging our sense of self-worth,
Oh, okay.
right? So like uncertainty, stepping outside your comfort zone, it's like, ooh, I don't know what's going to happen. That's scary because it challenges my sense of, can I handle this?
I see.
Fear of failure, obviously, is directly tied to how we perceive success and setbacks.
Yeah.
So if we fear failure, it's often because we're afraid of what that says about us as a person. Comparison, like you said, especially with social media, is huge because we're constantly bombarded with these like curated versions of other people's lives.
Yeah.
And so it's really easy to start feeling like, oh, I'm not good enough.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, past negative experiences, those can create these mental loops, right? It's like, oh, I messed up before, I'm going to mess up again.
Right, right. Okay, so we've got all these triggers. What do we do about it? How do we manage this self-doubt? Because the excerpt talks about this technique they call thought judo, which I thought was a very interesting term.
I love that term.
So what exactly is that? Like, how do you do thought judo?
So it's basically like, if you can imagine a negative thought as an opponent
Right. Okay.
that's trying to knock you off balance, instead of letting it just take control, you're using its force against it.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And so, the excerpt gives these 3 questions to ask yourself when you're having those I'm not good enough thoughts. And it's like, first, what evidence supports this thought?
Okay.
So you're actually like fact checking your
Oh,
doubts.
interesting. Okay.
Then the second question is, what evidence contradicts this thought?
Okay.
And then finally, what would I say to a friend in this situation?
Right.
Right. So you're basically gaining perspective. You're stepping outside of yourself and saying, okay, if my friend was telling me this, what would I say to them?
Yeah.
And chances are you'd be much more compassionate and realistic with them than you are with yourself.
Right. Right. No, I think that's great advice. So I'm thinking about this comparison thing.
Yes.
How would you use thought judo to manage that? Because I think so many of us, like I said, with social media, we're constantly comparing ourselves.
Absolutely.
So what would be an example of how you would use thought judo in that situation?
Okay, so let's say you're scrolling through your Instagram feed and you see someone who just seems to have it all, right?
Right.
They
Yeah.
got the perfect job, the perfect relationship, the perfect body, whatever it is.
Right.
The perfect life. The perfect life. Right. And you catch yourself thinking, oh, I'll never be as successful as them. I'll never have that.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the negative thought. Now, we're going to apply the thought judo. First question. What evidence supports this thought?
Okay.
Is it based on facts? Or is it based on assumptions and comparisons to this, curated version of reality that they're presenting on social media?
Right.
Second question. What evidence contradicts it? What are the things that you're doing well in your own life?
Okay.
What are your own strengths and accomplishments?
Yeah.
And then finally, what would you say to a friend who was feeling this way?
Yeah.
Chances are you would remind them that everyone's journey is different and that social media is not a reflection of real life.
Right. Right. No, that's such a good point. And it kind of reminds me of another strategy that the excerpt talks about, which
Okay.
is this idea of celebrating small wins.
Yes, absolutely. I love that point. So important.
Because I think sometimes we get so caught up in the big picture that we forget to acknowledge all the little steps we're taking along the way.
Exactly.
So how can we get better at celebrating those small wins?
Well, I think it's like, think about it like building a bridge.
Okay.
Each small win is like a brick. You might not see the whole bridge at first,
Right.
but each brick is getting you closer to the other side, to your goal.
I see.
And so celebrating those small wins, it's like acknowledging, hey, I laid another brick. I'm making progress.
Right. Right. No, I like that analogy. And it kind of ties in with this idea of focusing on your strengths, which the excerpt also talks about.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's key because, when we're feeling self-doubt, it's so easy to get bogged down in what we perceive as our weaknesses.
Right.
And so the excerpt talks about this idea of keeping a journal, a strength journal, where you actually track your achievements and your positive qualities.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Right. And it's just about creating that conscious awareness of, hey, I'm actually good at these things.
Yeah.
So instead of focusing on, oh, I'm not good at math or I'm not good at public speaking, it's like, okay, but I am really good at, coming up with creative solutions, or I'm really good at connecting with people.
Right. Right.
So you're shifting your focus to what you're already good at.
I love that. It's like creating a highlight reel of all your awesome moments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think it's a good reminder, too, that we all have strengths, even when we're feeling down on ourselves.
Absolutely. We all have unique strengths.
And, speaking of things that can be scary, the excerpt talks about this idea of not being afraid of failure,
Yes.
which, it's easier said than done.
It is. It is.
But I think it's such an important point because so much of self-doubt comes from this fear of, what if I mess up? What if I fail?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think the key here is to reframe failure, right?
Okay.
Think of it as feedback.
Yeah.
It's not a stop sign. It's a detour that can lead you to a better route. It's like, you're driving along, you hit a roadblock. You don't just give up and go home. You find another way around.
Right.
And so it's about shifting your perspective from what if I fail to what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
And how can I use this to grow?
That's great. And I think that leads nicely into the next point the excerpt makes, which is about the importance of surrounding yourself with supportive people.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, when you're feeling self-doubt, it's so easy to isolate yourself.
Yeah,
But having that support system can make such a big difference.
it really can. It's like having this, supportive ecosystem for your self-belief.
Right.
Right, because when we're doubting ourselves, we need people who can encourage us, believe in us, and offer a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
They remind us of our strengths when we forget them.
Yeah.
And they help us see challenges as opportunities for growth.
Right. Right. And I think it's important, too, to remember that it works both ways.
Yep.
Like, if you're surrounding yourself with negative people, that's going to have a negative impact on your self-doubt as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Surround yourself with people who lift you up, not drag you down. Choose your company wisely.
Exactly. And, I think all of this leads to this final point that the excerpt makes, which is about taking action.
Yes, absolutely. Action is key.
Because it's so easy to get stuck in your head when you're feeling self-doubt.
Yeah,
But the excerpt argues that the best way to overcome that is to just do something.
exactly. Action breaks the cycle of overthinking, and it builds momentum.
Okay.
And here's the thing, we often wait to feel confident before taking action.
Right.
But the truth is, confidence often follows action.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, if you're doubting yourself, challenge yourself to take one small step forward, even if it feels scary.
Right. Right. So to kind of sum all this up, it sounds like self-doubt is normal.
It is.
It's manageable. And it can even be helpful in some cases. But the key is to challenge those negative thoughts. Focus on your strengths, build a good support system, and most importantly, take action.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's great. I'm glad we could dive into this topic today. And before we go, I want to leave our listeners with one final question.
Okay.
What's one area in your life where self-doubt has been holding you back?
Mm-hmm.
And I challenge you to apply one of the strategies we talked about today and see what happens.
I think you'll be amazed by the results.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us on this deep dive into overcoming self-doubt. Until next time, remember to be kind to yourself and keep moving forward.
One step at